Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Mike Debord, president of B3 Sciences. I want to welcome you to our high school athlete BFR presentation. Tonight's presentation is about our guests. Most of you have heard me and seen me. Tonight, you're going to hear from experts. You're going to hear from athletes. You're going to hear from doctors. You're going to hear from world champions. You're going to hear from Guinness World Record holders. You're going to hear from NFL strength coaches. And they're going to share with you what they've experienced with BFR. The focus is on athletes. I'm going to spend just a few minutes and I want to bring up some information for you. I'm going to start with a video. I want to share with you what BFR looks like when it's applied to athletes. This is about 1 minute and 40 seconds. That's just a few of our athletes that have used BFR. As you can see from the video, this just isn't just a rehab tool, and it's not just a strength tool. You can get faster, jump higher, hit harder, throw harder, have more explosion, recover faster, improve speed, improve endurance in all different types of sports. Next, I want to bring up for you a quick PowerPoint. I'm going to show you 2 slides, and then we're going to get started with the presentation. BFR is changing the game for athletes. Here's what I want to share with you. I would encourage all of you to go out to Google Scholar. BFR is not a fad. This is a scientific technology breakthrough in exercise. Down at the top, if you go to Google Scholar and you type in BFR, blood flow restriction, there's over 12,000 papers and articles. Here's what's amazing. People think BFR is a rehab tool. It absolutely is. They think it's a tool for physical therapists. Absolutely. And it's a tool for NFL training rooms. But look what happens when you type in BFR athletes. Over 5,000, not 5, not 50, 5,000 articles. Let me read for you a recent study that came out in July of 2025. In this study, they looked across all the spectrum of science, not just one study. This is called a meta-analysis or a peer review. That means they have a body of science that they can pull from. Here's what these researchers determined. Blood flow restriction is recommended as an innovative approach for schools, parents, and sports organizations to incorporate into youth fitness programs to foster safe and effective physical development in adolescence. It promotes muscle hypertrophy, strength, endurance, and neuromuscular adaptation. Now, here's the big one. It does this using low intensity loads. which means we can get similar and in many cases better results in our athletes with less stress, especially on their growth plates. And it's proven to create a lower injury risk profile in relation to traditional training. That's not saying that it is similar. That's saying it is more efficient. Now, what do we know about high school athletes? We know they're not professionals. They don't use the best form. They don't use the best technique. Well, one of the things that we've perfected that you can learn more about is a couple methods I've developed. One is called the 1-5-10 method. This is how long you would use BFR. And another one's called the 50% burn rule. Now, tonight is not about those. That just gives you an idea. Tonight is about our speakers. Our first speaker tonight that we're going to bring up is Dr. Ken Otto. And Dr. Ken is a chiropractor in Appleton, Wisconsin, with over 30 years of practice. He has 5 years of BFR experience personally. He's implemented in his clinic. Dr. Ken also travels and speaks at chiropractic symposiums. Several times a year, he travels sometimes with me, and we train anywhere from 20 up to 60 or 70 chiropractors. And he has had firsthand experience. So, Dr. Ken, thanks for joining us. Dr. Ken, you coined an interesting statement. I hear you say it all the time, right? These young athletes leave food on the table. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, they leave, the athletic performance, if you're not training with BFR, you're leaving low-hanging fruit or you're leaving meat on the bone kind of thing. And what I mean by that is the technology is able to create a deeper level of fatigue, more muscle recruitment, and it mimics high-level elite athlete input into the physiology, and then it starts to cascade with growth hormone and et cetera, et cetera. But we have seen it time and time again that people do traditional exercise. Well, I'll just work out harder. I'll just do heavier. I'll just do more. And we find that with BFR, we can actually use less weights, less time, and oftentimes complement what they're already doing for workouts because people aren't quite to the point of replacing. But it's a great adjunct, and you're going to improve speed, agility, quickness, explosiveness, improve recovery. So we could go on and on about that, but that's basically what I'm saying.
And, you and I always say, because we've seen it, Doc, it's an unfair advantage if the other person's not using it. Tell us about the basketball program you did.
Well, when I first came across BFR, it rang some bells for me. I I'm skeptical by nature as a chiropractor, so I had to do my own little research study. So I gathered a bunch of high school kids together, all levels, but they all were multi-sport. They were well versed in, uh, you know, other sports than just basketball. We did a 3 day a week for a month, so 12 workouts. Workouts were, eight to 10, maybe 12 minutes tops, kind of a thing. Doing basketball moves. They'd do some layups. They would jump. They would do their defensive slides. I forget the name of we did like a shuttle drill, right? And we timed and measured all these before we did any BFR workouts, and then we did it again at the end of the 12 sessions in a month. And everybody either they increased their vertical. They all increased their vertical. They all got quicker, and they all got more explosive because we tested vertical, or pardon me, standing broad jump. In fact, the kid that was the slowest on the shuttle drill in a month's time became the quickest. So quite astonishing. And we added in 1 month between 1 and 3 inches in vertical. I mean, tell me
Amazing.
what else is going to do that.
Yeah.
There were some of the kids that stuck around for a second month, and everybody gained between 3 and 5 inches in 60 days. So
Then you
pretty
had
impressive.
you had a high school swim athlete that you implemented.
Yeah, and this speaks to the fact that I don't control and I don't get into the people's programs in the schools if they don't want me. But this swim team was doing three a days, swimming three times a day. I talked to the mother about this. I said, "Hey, your daughter's going to need some recovery. I know the last thing she wants to do is anything extra after three swim workouts in a day." But she put the bands on and did some light, body weight exercises, light flexible tubing kind of a thing. And she would do it 3 days a week. And she took 5 seconds off of her, well, I guess it was a 500-meter breaststroke, 5 seconds off of her previous PR mid-season. So, and the only thing different between her and the rest of the kids was BFR.
And then you had a track athlete, didn't you?
One of my favorite stories because this girl, a patient of mine since birth, she'd done every track workout. She played basketball, but she went to Drake University in Iowa. She'd done every track workout any coach ever have her do, and it speaks to the benefit of BFR. Again, she wasn't going to go talk to her coach and say, "I'm going to do this instead. I'm going to just add it to what I'm already doing." Normal track workout, go back to her apartment at the end of the day and she would do body weight squats, a little bit of speed work, basically our 4 minute leg workout. She took 2 seconds off of her previous PR, just 2 weeks of BFR training. The next weekend, she had another meet, so another three workouts, so 3 weeks total. She took 4 seconds off her previous PR in a 600 indoor. Her coaches were just dumbfounded. She was ecstatic. She was a senior. A great way for her to end her college career.
And Doc, that's that low hanging fruit. That's a high school athlete who hasn't learned to train like an Olympic athlete.
Right.
And for everybody on the call, I've seen this in 9 years. You take a young athlete, and you'll hear from my son, and it's like you move them into a professional or an Olympic level training. Now, here, listen to what he said: 10 minutes, not an hour, not heavy weights, not sore. Dr. Ken, what would you recommend for anybody who's got a high school athlete or trains them?
You're cutting out on me a little bit here, but I would highly recommend if you have anybody that we have teams that we implement with any individual athlete that's looking for an edge. They're going to recover better. They're going to perform better. If it's a weight focus, there's certainly things that we can do in getting strength training with weight training. It can be speed related. It can be agility related. Um, it's a massive advantage, and you're going to hear from the rest of this panel and hear more and more results along that line.
Thanks, Dr. Ken. Well, this next guy is no stranger to strength. This is one of the most famous power lifters in history. When I met Chris, he already knew about BFR, but he was using the kind of crude BFR straps. This is Chris Duffin. Chris is the first man to ever squat and deadlift 1,000 pounds. Everybody take that in. 1,000 pound for reps. He's a world Guinness record holder. He's an author. They call him the mad scientist in the powerlifting industry. And I have the privilege of getting to know him. We've actually done podcasts on how he used BFR. Chris, thanks for joining us. Give us a quick summary, of how you used BFR.
Yeah, I'm going to hit some different applications that people might not have heard of, and it's going to be pretty wild, the results that I talk about. So really quick, when I'm talking about, it's going to sound like, wow, BFR works for everything. So I want to frame that with a little bit of science. You don't have to understand what I'm saying. And if you want to get deeper, you can get on my YouTube and, you can get some more science stuff. But I want to talk about the cellular level signaling that goes on with BFR, not just the growth hormone release, things like that. Like you can elicit so many different types of effects. So I just want to quick set the frame for that one before diving into some examples that are going to blow you away. But we can basically stimulate PGC1 alpha as a signaling pathway, which is mitochondrial biogenesis. It's essentially like updating the software of your operating system at a cell level, and get endurance adaptations at the same time. That's using BFR with low intensity interval, low intensity steady state training. We can signal AMPK. That's energy sensing. It's going to increase fat oxidation. We can increase glucose uptake. That, along with a few other things, I'm going to talk about the impact and how I use that to enhance what I call tissue quality. But that's done with the same LLIS as well as metabolic conditioning. We can affect SIRT1 signaling pathways. We're talking straight up longevity, mitochondrial turnover, reducing the aging effect. And again, also impacting that PGC1 alpha pathway. And that's using lactate-driven metabolic work. Or if we're doing metabolic circuits or high intensity interval training or sprints, that's affecting VEGF, vascular remodeling, angiogenesis, the formation of new capillaries. And then lastly, traditional hypertrophy, using that to stimulate mTOR, muscle protein synthesis, hypertrophy, cellular swelling, helping with that metabolite buildup. So that's the quick. Don't need to understand all that. If you want to get into that, join me on my channel. But how did I put that in place? We're talking, so there's one example. The individual allowed me to do his case study publicly. He tore off both quads off his knee, completely detached. He's in the hospital, surgery, in a wheelchair, has to learn to walk again after surgery. Standard care in clinical literature is after 2 years, 50% of people never return to play. Let that sink in. 2 years, 50% never return to play. 60% still have pain, stiffness, or both. At that. Standard care is being able to walk 2 miles at 6 months is considered a great outcome. My individual was deadlifting 700 pounds at 10 weeks. And shortly thereafter, set a powerlifting total that was in the 0.0001% of the population for strength, with zero pain, zero stiffness, full return rate change of motion. Again, BFR was a huge part of that. There was a lot of other things that helped stimulate some of those same pathways as well. It wasn't only BFR, but that was a central component of that. My 1,000-pound squat, BFR was an amazing piece of that. So I mentioned this impact on glucose uptake, cellular swelling, metabolite buildup. Like, you can use that. I use it in a day before meet, but in this case, day before training, which was so intense. I would do BFR the day before because I hadn't trained as much that week. Again, this can be really valuable for coaches to know because I would fill out my muscles. I would do a small BFR session and walk away from that like I'd done a couple days worth of full body training, but I hadn't taken the load. And now I've reduced the potentiation for an injury risk because I'm not walking into a heavy workout or a game with flat muscles that don't have that uptake. And then I would do BFR again before the day that I'm going to squat 970 pounds for 3 sets of triples. The day after I did it for prep, but this time to speed up my recovery, my warm up, so that I could not fatigue myself, have that same load and demand that would wear me out as I worked all the way up to 970 pounds. I could jump in and have both that physiological, again, drawing more substrate material into the tissue and having it ready to be used and available in that workout that I wouldn't normally be. I'd be in a super compensated period, stepping up to those heavy weights and not fatigued. I mean, just think about that. And then again, using that afterwards. How do I stimulate? How do I improve those endurance adaptations when I didn't have the ability to do that physical type of training, but that also my ability to recover from workouts is greatly affected by that level of fitness. So being able to do that with, integrating that with some low intensity interval sessions. Oftentimes I would do that right after my training. So those are some big hitters that people just don't think about. And that's why I wanted to touch on the science, because if I just start spouting this stuff off, you're like, wow, that's crazy. I did crazy things. And that's why I spent so much time learning BFR and the applications and playing different pathways, because I wanted to do amazing things that hadn't been done and had to figure out all the cheat codes. And BFR is a massive cheat code.
Chris, what do you recommend? Right? You got all these high school athletes, right? One of the biggest things that happens is technique. right? They're not power lifters, but they're slamming heavy weights. What would you recommend to all the people out there that work with high school athletes?
Yeah, that's a problem when you've got large populations and you can't manage all of those, right? To the technique and skill development that needs to be done before putting a massive load on them. So just being able to take your hypertrophy training and go, hey, we're going to do 30 or 40% of a one rep max, and then doing, some giant sets. They're walking away. They feel challenged. Like, wow, they walk away from training feeling great, feeling like they pushed themselves, but they didn't have to try to chase a 400-pound back squat when they're not ready for that from a skill adaptation standpoint and risking that injury. The ability to drive deeper into that fatigue is going to do the same cellular level thing that happens when you've got a highly skilled athlete that's got perfect technique that can push into that area. Because once you get that skill, now you could push a tissue to where you've got that lactate threshold point. You're pushing, and affecting sustained hypoxia. Like, these things are happening in training once you've got a high level of skill and you can actually not fatigue out the stabilizing muscle. So this allows you to do that, get those effects without taking on the risk. A lot of them may not want to do some of the extra metabolic work. Hey, they can now do walking, some cycling, some body weight circuits with those bands on. Boom, start getting some of those endurance adaptations that affecting that mitochondrial biogenesis, which is going to ramp up their metabolic rate, make sure that their body composition stays good. Like, all this happens just like so easy if you employ that really well, and it becomes really easy to do that.
Thanks, Chris. Everybody, you can see why they call him the mad scientist. This guy is he's on a different level, and I've learned a lot from him. I think that speaks volumes to what you can do with BFR. Quick story. When I started doing BFR 10, 12 years ago, people would laugh at me. Oh, you can't build muscle. You can't build strength. Well, now it's obvious that we can. Let's bring on our next guest here. Let's talk about baseball. Let's get me back up here with Dr. Carl. But Dr. Carl is a chiropractor in Nashville, Tennessee, with 25 years of practice, 4 years of BFR experience. He also is one of our educators and travels around. And his specialty is baseball. Why? Because he is a baseball player himself, and he's developed a program. And if any of you have athletes that throw any kind of throwing, lacrosse, tennis, football, baseball, you're going to want to hear what Dr. Carl has to say. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Carl.
Thank you, Dr. Mike. So yeah, quick backstory. So I did play collegiate baseball at UC San Diego back in '96. I graduated. We went to the Division III World Series. I caught my freshman year as rookie of the year, so I played, I think, 35 starts out of 36 games. So I played a lot of collegiate ball, but part of my choice in playing catcher rather than pitching was my arm. My arm couldn't handle it. And I always knew that I couldn't pitch and then come back and even throw the next day. I needed a lot of time rest, and it just couldn't handle it. So that's what kind of put me into the position players. But now I'm 52. I play on two different teams, a 50 and over, a 30 and over. On the 30 and over, which we still play against ex-major leaguers from, say, 2 years retired, I've pitched more than half our game or half our innings on our team. So what I've done is the last 3-4 years playing with blood flow restriction bands as my guide. I've been able to recover instead of having about 9 days before it starts, I can pitch on 2 days rest, 3 days rest. I have no pain after. It's just absolutely incredible. I've never been able to strengthen and stabilize my shoulder and then recover as fast as now. And this is all I do for my health at home. I mean, I do blood flow restriction probably every day, but I really utilize it as a recovery from pitching. If I play tournament, I'll do it the night before. I'll do it the day of. I'll do it that night. So I'll do it before the next game. I just repeat it over and over because, I mean, there's no way to get this type of recovery doing anything else. And it takes me 3 to 5 minutes most days. So you want me to go into more how I would use it on a high school team?
Yeah, Carl, talk about how a
'Cause-
baseball player can easily implement this.
Yeah, and here's what I've looked at. There was a study that was done where they took two groups of pitchers, and this is where it really hit home for me. One group of pitchers just, threw off the mound, did the regular workouts every day. 3 days a week, they'd throw off the mound, 100% effort, and so forth. The other group took one day and did 100% effort, and the other 2 days they substituted with the blood flow restriction band workout. Well, that group actually had less injuries, less tendonitis, but they also threw harder and they had more spin rate. So spin rate's basically how do we figure out how much you can affect the ball, right? So that group did better than the group going all out. And what I've noticed for me is if you can basically substitute that, especially early in the season, preseason, I'll throw off a mound, but I'll throw at 70% effort. And it's as if I was throwing 100% effort without putting that type of strain and torque on that arm so early in the season, so it can build faster, be in mid-shape form by the time you get out there, and you'll never have tendonitis all year. And that's something huge for me because I tore my labrum when I was 8. It's always been a problem, but now I'm able to recover and build up faster than ever. So I would use it a lot of preseason, absolutely every night after they played or morning after, the night game or whatever it would be. And then try to just substitute a couple of those big heavy workouts with the blood flow restriction workouts and lightweight. And you'll see more recovery, faster build than ever.
And Dr. Carl, you treat these kids, right? These athletes that throw and then they lift heavy weights on top of the throwing.
Right.
I mean, what do they end up with? They all end up with the same problems, don't they?
Well, I think especially in pitching specifically, right, you got to work a lot more on balance, right? So you got to have a lot of mobility, right? Mobility kind of being number one. And when you're working out heavy, like for me, I couldn't work out at certain times during the year because it would just tighten me. I wouldn't have the flexibility. I'd feel like I'd tear things or pull things. And this allows you to go with lightweight, so you're never sore and you never get, shorter in muscles, right? So, and my big thing is I watch the Dodgers who have, all the money in the world, and that's my team, but why are they always hurt? Tendonitis, arm soreness, fatigue, right? Tendonitis in the elbow, tendonitis in the shoulder. I'm like, come on, guys. I mean, if they were using blood flow restriction bands the way they're supposed to use them, I don't think you would see the same injuries. I'm not.
And Dr. Carl, right? We're up against this big paradigm shift, right? Until Chris Duffin, right? You got a guy like that breaks through the strength barrier. Now you got Mitchell Hooper, the world's strongest man, doing BFR every workout. What would you recommend for all the people who treat throwing type athletes, Dr. Carl?
I don't think there's anything different in that. You're always going to want to use a multitude of, strengthening, mobility, cardio, a big combination. But if you can utilize blood flow restriction bands with whatever program you come up with, you can lower weights, lower resistance, get more benefit, and you alternate it, right? And that way you can build faster, build stronger, build healthier.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Carl. And by the way, everyone, Dr. Carl has created workouts for baseball pitchers, and we'll make sure you have access to learn how to get a hold of those after tonight's presentation. Let's move over to golf. Gaylord Rhodes has been a golf instructor for 37 years. He's instructed people at all levels. He's nicknamed the Vegas Golf Coach. He has developed a golf program that will be available in early spring, all the workouts before, after. And not only did he have an amazing story that he'll share with you, but he has developed a futuristic golf program that not only will help people in their middle ages, but is going to absolutely change the game for young golfers. Gaylord, welcome tonight. Share with us what you experienced and then why this is going to be so powerful for young golfers.
Well, Mike, when I found the bands 4 years ago, I was unable to work out. And if you understand the golf swing, energy in golf is the result of a weight transfer. So it's there are rotational forces involved. And as I got older, I had knee issues. I mean, I didn't have and we've heard the story about how all these things happen to us, and there was no way for me really as an older gentleman to recover. So what happened to me is I teach. The thing in golf today, it's not about club head speed anymore. The new word is ball speed. And so I had an indoor center, and I was working with some of the higher elite high school players here in town, and they're doing TPI workouts, and they're seeing some performance. But I was able to, in my case, I was able to increase my club head speed over the course of about 3 months. I went from barely able to get to 100-mile-an-hour ball speed to about 110, which allows me to have a ball speed that's the equivalent of what was happening 10 years ago. Today, unless you can generate over 175 miles an hour with the ball speed, you're not going to be able to compete at, you can compete at the high school level maybe, but if you're looking to go to college, you've got to hit it over 300 yards to get a look. And so the result of using the bands and here the key, you need to have strong legs, the thighs support and stabilize the hips, and the calves are where you get the jump. And today the golf swing is a jump. And so I went in and watched some TPI workouts, and I applied them to one of my younger 14-year-old high school kids who's very small for his age. And we were able to get him to do the same exercise the trainers were teaching him, but we had him do the bands and do a lot of it at home. And so now we're jumping, and I know that you hear the stories about people getting more vertical leap. Well, if you understand the golf swing, the upper body loads into the right hip, and then you unwind from the body up into the left hip. And so having strong calves allows you to jump, and thighs stabilize everything. So if you're looking to be a high school player, there's no better way to increase your club head speed and ball speed than working with the bands. And in my case, at 67, I'd probably kind of given up hope of ever playing at a high level. And within 3 months, I was playing golf like I was in my 30s and 40s. And I really feel like in the case of high school students, there's no better way to train, irregardless. And I've talked to some high school coaches, and they're putting them through these protocols. And in reality, I think some of that is, not necessarily correct. And watching some of the TPI works, the first thing you do is they have you jump up and see how high you can jump. And that in itself would tell you that the vertical leap increase that we've seen in these athletes is so key. And so I have several kids right now, very young, 14, about to get into high school. They want to play high school golf, and we're working on jump techniques. We're working on rotational moves, and we're not stressing the body, and the kids are getting stronger, and their club head speed's going up. I've seen an increase of almost 15 miles an hour in club head speed in a young 14-year-old man, and the key is ball speed now. We don't even talk about clip speed anymore.
And that's Gaylord. The key here is, right, we can build their strength and swing up without loading them with heavy weight and then getting into an overuse injury. And that's huge, right?
And if you want to know the opposite, look at Tiger Woods. He's blown his right knee out 5 times. He's had back hits. He was doing Navy SEAL workouts to maintain his speed and power, and his body's just destroyed. At 50, he's, whether he plays again, we don't know. There's no need to do that. There's no need to stress anymore. We have the ability to take these young men and get them to the level that they're looking for, which is ideally for the high school kids, is to try to get into college and play college golf. And, whether, I don't care who they're working with, what they're doing. I can't wait till we get our stuff out. I just think it's so much easier to perform. And that was really, I used it to rehab my body. So don't forget the rehab part. And Dr. Carl, no more pain, no more tendonitis, no more knee pain, no more arthritis. And so these kids can play golf for the rest of their life at a very high level. And I wish I'd have known about this when I was in my 30s trying to compete out on the tour. And today it's just a pleasure to be able to share this with. And I work at a senior golf course. I do a lot of my lessons there, and just as an example, I have seniors now that are actually playing at a level they never thought they could play. And you take this to an athletic and a kid who's working out, he's on the team, he's working with the trainers. And I'm just so excited that one of our top high schools here in town is now using the bands to work with their.
Thanks, Gaylord.
And I just think that's where it's going to be. And in 10 years from now, it's going to be mainstream.
Awesome. Thanks, Gaylord. Thanks for sharing that. Now let's move over to martial arts. Let me bring Vinny Meng in here. Vincent Meng. Vincent went to school with my son, Colin. And what's the first time I meet this young man, he is spinning around and kicking this paddle, and he's almost knocking it out of the kid's hand. And all I can tell you is if he catches you with a kick, he's going to snap a bone in half. That's how powerful he is. He's not a local champion. He's a 3-time world champion. I believe he's the only martial artist in the world that holds 3 championships, world championships, and he has 6 medals. And he's going to share with you why BFR has been a great tool for his training. Let's start, Vince, with, your own training. We talk a lot about, this sport creates a lot of injury. You've got to have a way to train, right, without loading up the body and making that worse. Why was BFR such a big impact for you?
Yeah, I think that it really hits. Thanks, Dr. Mike, for having me. And it hits really 3 points, I guess, when it comes to martial arts specifically. My first big injury was back in 2022. I tore my labrum, had 13 clips, and I was, I believe, 7 months out of a competition, a world championship in Italy, and B3 got me back punching, striking, training. Typically, we like to have a camp in preparation for a big competition about 3 months out. And I was 3 months post surgery, full range of motion, striking, and it definitely speed up the process of recovery. And I like to say, we don't get injured a lot, but it's the nature of the sport. When we do, it was a game changer. My brother, he just competed in Brazil at the Wushu World Championships. He tore his shoulder as well, not at the World Championships, but he was in 9 weeks punching and striking again. Again, using the BFR with proper discipline. Along with that, as a martial art athlete, I think we are more of a niche sport in the sense that there's, I guess, a general training outside of martial or other sports that you do strength and conditioning. For martial arts, the basic philosophy is, if you want to kick better, kick harder, kick faster, kick more. And so the BFR bands allowed us to maintain our martial art training. We can do squats, we can do other things in which, us as top level athletes and my athletes now, they still lift, but BFR allows them to still kick and train, do their normal routine with the BFR bands, even if it's 10 minutes. And it's definitely, I not only compete myself, I compete in MMA, I compete at the highest level. It's really cool as I'm getting to my late 20s, I'm starting to coach, and I coached at the last 4 world championships for juniors and seniors, and I put them on the bands, and it's really been incredible for them. And then lastly, for myself and athletes, for us, we have to cut weight, we have to make weight. And so there's a time period where we lift heavy, but then there's also a time period where that's an absolutely not a thing that we have to avoid because we can't gain weight. We actually, in fact, have to lose weight. So BFR bands allow us to still get our strength and conditioning, still incorporate it in our regular training, and not gain weight that we obviously cannot have. Oh, Dr. Mike.
And Vince, this used to be kind of a rehab thing. Nobody thought, right, it was going to be mainstream. Where do you see this going in the martial arts world, in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I'll say this. I'm just a little fish, and my guys, and part of me selfish is like, we can keep it for my guys, and but at the same time, I want to share it, all throughout United States because The sport I compete in is it's called Wushu Sanda, and we are competing against countries that are fully governmented by their are fully supported by their government, fully sponsored. They pay to play, even though this is an amateur sport that we compete at. Whereas we pay to play, we do it for passion, and this is definitely giving us the edge and being able to compete against these top level countries, Iran, China, Philippines, all these countries, and at least in our sport, they have all the best technology. And this past September, we went to World Championships. We brought 2 medals, which is kind of unheard of in the United States. So we're planning to change that, and I think BFR is going to be a great asset for this.
Awesome. Thanks, Vince. Appreciate
Yeah.
you being here. Okay, everyone, let's now go talk about speed. See if we can find Colin here, and we'll get him added in here. This guy's I'm kind of passionate about this kid. At 7, 8 years old, he wants to play football. I remember in the backyard at Greg Jones's house, he remembers Cooper Jones, and he got the bug. He wanted to be a football player. Well, being my personality, I kind of pushed him, but I always told Colin, if you don't want to be pushed, you just let me know and I'll back off. Well, he dove in. He started doing speed training at a young age because football is about speed and agility. And here he is, 17 years old. He's been working his whole life, and he wants to be a Division I football player, right? He doesn't want to go play at some Division III school. He wants to play, at Division I. Well, he was fast, but he wasn't elite college fast. And Colin had access to all the best equipment. If you go in this facility where Vic Piegler trains, higher level athletic training in Dayton, he has every tool there is. It is absolutely amazing, but that only got him so far. So I simply gave the bands to Colin and Vic, and all I said was, if you're going to train him, I want him in the bands when you're doing it. And Colin will now share with you, how did that change things for you, Colin? You did a 12-week program.
Yeah, so thanks for having me. Like you said, I was doing all the things everybody else was doing. I'm sure people have heard of Vertimax, a lot of tubing, air resistance exercises, state-of-the-art stuff, and obviously getting results there. I was running 19 miles per hour, running like 4.6, 4.7, so I was already fast. All we did was kept doing the same workouts we were pretty much doing already and just threw the bands on. Do a Vertimax with the bands, do the treadmill with the bands. A lot of times, maybe doing a normal workout, I'm dead, I'm fatigued, I don't have much more to give. So throw the bands on, lower the resistance. Started doing that for probably 6 to 8 weeks. And I think my junior year is when I started to see a big change. Ran a 4.35 hand time laser at Ohio State. I was fast before, but nothing that would get me a scholarship or anything. And so we incorporated the bands, saw a lot of results there. And obviously we've heard about the rehab side too. I had a bone bruise and a partially torn ACL my senior year. Thought I'd be done for the year for sure. It was week 6, only 10 weeks of football. We literally just put the bands on outside at a park, just jogged, did some light exercises, and I was sprinting again in 4 weeks. So there's obviously implementation in both rehab and performance. And I think it's been touched on that it's hard to kind of break through this traditional thing of, we can just bang weights, do the traditional things, and kind of get the results. But I can be the first one to say that I'm 27 years old and I've got so many things wrong with me that I wish I did more of this in college and high school, because the heavy weights kind of will obviously weigh on you in the end. So I think it's huge. Whoever adopts this first in the high school space, it's probably going to get a big head start on people. So, I experienced it firsthand, and I can definitely say that it'll get some results.
So, Colin, you're a football player, right? Never ran track, right? I think you ran track one time when you're 9, 10 years old, absolutely hated it. And then the track coach sees, I think he saw your U.S. Army combine thing. and he invites you out to the track team. Now, let me tell you, everyone, this is big school D1, and they compete for state championships in track, not small school. This is big Centerville, Ohio. And Colin, tell them about how you went out with a bunch of track athletes and where they put you.
Yeah, so not much of a benchmark to go off of because I hadn't done track freshman or sophomore year, but decided to pick it up junior year. I think I came out, was running like 11 threes, 11 twos, was doing the training, got below 11s, and I ended up anchoring the 4x100 team. We set a state school record, and it really helped with my endurance, right? Because a football player, running 100 and 200 meter, that's not something football players really focus on. It's more of the short sprint stuff. So I think it helped a lot with my endurance. And I think that's the great thing about it is no matter what the sport is, you can just throw them on, whether you're swimming, golfing, sprinting, and it can be implemented pretty much anywhere.
Awesome. Appreciate that, Colin. And he said it very well. I think the big thing here, everyone, is that we didn't change the training. Here's what's fascinating. I always get this, well, what do I do? And you heard it from Chris, you heard it from, Carl, you're doing the same stuff, just quicker and easier. We're not changing exercise. We're just using a different tool. It's like altitude training. Runners start running at altitude and they get a whole different level of results. When athletes use BFR and do the same training, they get a whole different level of results. Well, that's now good transition to, let me find Coach Ryan here. I had the great opportunity to meet Coach Ryan Reindel. He's a strength coach in Lima, Ohio for the girls basketball program. I met him through Dr. Gorman. And what I love about Coach is he didn't let paradigms get in the way. He listened to Coach, Dr. Gorman. He said, look, if this is going to make my athletes better, and my daughter better, I'm going to figure out how to implement it. So this wasn't like you got one athlete doing it. They went all in. They bought 10 sets of bands and they outfitted the whole girls basketball teams. So Coach, thanks for joining us. Share with us, kind of how you implemented and what you've seen.
Yeah. To start out, I'm not a world-class athlete. I'm not a strength, a world strongest man competitor, not a professional athlete, but it does show that you can use this at any level and at any age group. So I got introduced to BFR working with Dr. Gorman and my daughter, and it really just started out buying bands for our family. And he talked about the benefits that it could be for her, and she really wanted to increase her vertical. So we started using those 6 weeks over the summer. And really saw a huge change in her endurance, her vertical jump. She went from just a hand above the net in volleyball to about mid forearm. I think she increased about 3.5 inches on her vertical over that 6-week training in the summer. Then we bought a whole set for our basketball team. We really felt like this was going to be kind of a way for us to use the bands and add that endurance to the second half of the season. Last year, just to kind of give you the makeup of our team, we graduated one senior last year, but we went 9-15. So we brought a lot of girls back, but we're very guard centered on our team. We play a very fast pace. We press most of the game. And we felt like when you get to that second half of the season, you start to lose your legs. You start to wear down a little bit more. And if we were going to try to keep that high pace and press, and we needed to build our speed, but also to keep our endurance. This year, we're currently 11-5, second in our conference. And we have really seen kind of an edge. And I'll talk a little bit about what our girls are feeling a little bit more here in a bit, but we've really seen an edge come out in the second half of how we perform, and we just don't wear down.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's the key, everyone, is is when you improve endurance and VO2 max, whether you're a wrestler or a golfer on the 18th hole or a basketball player in the second half or a football player. Coach will tell you this, coach, the person who breaks technique first is usually going to lose, aren't they?
Absolutely. And when you start to wear down, like you said, your technique, your mental focus, your fundamentals kind of go to the wayside. And we've seen a huge difference, like with our turnover difference in the second half. We're out turning teams over, or that turnover differential. We're plus 52 in the second half right now.
Wow. Wow. So just real quick, give an idea, right? This is, how do you implement this, right? And what did the girls think of it?
So we still get in the weight room twice a week. Our weights are upper bodies. So we split them up, and they're working upper body strength, med balls, dumbbells, weights like that. But then they put the bands on and they get in the hallway for about 10 minutes. We start off with wall sits just to activate. Then we'll just do squat jumps. They might throw the ball off the backboard for rebounds, lane shuffles, box jumps, line jumps, ladders, and those kind of things. And then one day a week we use them after practice.
Mm-hmm. And I know I've been up there and talked to him. You said it's kind of a love-hate relationship with the bands, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. There was some skepticism at the beginning. The girls were not liking the first few workouts, but because it's different, and you get to that burn so quickly. When you run, you'll get tired, and then your legs kind of go a little bit later. Your legs go pretty quick, and when you're in the bands, and so we had to really, convince them to keep pushing through, that. And since we've used them for a few months, they've really bought into it. After a few different games, some of those girls came over to me after the game and they're like, Coach, they wore down and we didn't tonight. And, that is a huge tribute to where those bands are at and how our girls have really bought into it.
Appreciate that, Coach. Look forward to hearing more about how the team's doing. Thanks for coming on tonight.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay. Hey, let's move now to the NFL level. Elite strength coach. This is Chad Dennis. I met Chad when he was strength coach at Bowling Green. He's been a strength coach in the NFL, in the XFL, at the collegiate level, and now he's working with special warfare, elite soldiers in the military with strength. And he kind of comes at it from a different approach. I know, Chad, when you started using BFR, right? It's not like you can just implement a BFR program across the board, right? You're picking and choosing these athletes that maybe can't lift heavy, these professional athletes, right? And at the level you're at, your sole purpose is to keep them on the field and keep them strong. So I know you've had a great one with BFR. We look forward to, hearing your thoughts and how you've implemented it.
Thanks, Dr. Mike, for having me tonight. Yeah, you're exactly right. So it's my experience so far has been as much as I might like to, and to be able to get it on 10, 20 athletes at a time, it would be fantastic. Sometimes it's not always conducive to do so. I'll just start off with, I'll say for me personally, I've got some damage from years and 3 knee surgeries on one knee and et cetera. But so I got introduced to BFR. I was made aware of it probably, I don't know, so probably somewhere around 2012. So I mean, it's been a while. Clearly wasn't very prevalent at that time. I started gaining some more notoriety when I was with the Houston Texans. Started to actually get to implement it more there with some athletes. But well, I guess one story there was I was part of a team, so I was a strength coach there, and also working with the sports med team. We had a pretty famous player, J.J. Watt, that went down with the back injury that was prior to the season. So of course that sends a panic throughout the building. Whenever somebody like that's that effective in their play, it goes down. And so I was actually just part of the team with the strength coaches and the sports med team to help kind of start to get him put back together. And so BFR was a huge part of that because he literally could not load anything on his spine. and so I got to see firsthand what, you know, with a high level athlete like that. I know we're kind of speaking about high school athletes, and that's pretty far. That's a pretty far um, down the assembly line whenever you get to somebody like that compared to high school. But um, it it still coincides with what can be done at a high school level, and somebody like myself being much older. So now it's 2021. We all know what was going on in 2021. Didn't have any access to a gym, right? Things were locked down. Luckily I had met Dr. Mike a couple of years prior to that. And he was nice enough to hook me up with a couple sets of bands. I know. So one thing that I did was I would go to a park. I'd throw the bands on my legs and also of course use it on the upper body. I'd use the large rubber resistance bands because that was the only resistance I could get a hold of. I could do some things at a park, which was kind of nice to do some workout outside. So I'm thinking, it had been several weeks. I don't know, probably 2, 3 months at this point, and I had not even lifted a 5 pound plate because I didn't have access to it. I go back. I'm thinking, all right, I'm gonna go back to the gym. Things kind of start to ease up. I'm gonna go back to the gym. I'm thinking, I'm not gonna be able to lift anything. I'm gonna be sore. This isn't gonna be good. And it was the exact opposite. I walked in the gym and weights were moving that I had not moved in for sure 3 months, if not longer. And I was moving weight and I now I granted I held myself back just because I was unsure. And once I started kind of feeling it out, after about a week, I was like, I got stronger. And all that I was using was the band and also the large resistance rubber bands and some body weight exercises with the bands on. So that for me, just on a personal level, it sold me. So yeah, so speakers earlier have talked about the rehab side. I've definitely seen it on the rehab side as I spoke about, and that's not with just him, but also many other athletes as well, and for various injuries, could be knees, back, shoulders, whatever it may be. Um, but then started to integrate it more onto the performance side, um, which can be, which, there's also some speakers talking about on the performance side as well. And I mean, it sounds like everyone's had some fantastic results, and I have too. And it's just the fact that you can, whereas I would prefer to load someone for at least a one workout per week, and then being able to use the BFR bands, on the other, maybe one or two other workouts. Of course, it just kind of depends on the time of year, whether it's off season and in season, getting into all those things. One thing as far as the high school athlete, um, that I was thinking about, and this is just hearing from colleagues I've worked with that have been in high school, and you could run into some athletes that they play more than one sport, and and so a lot of time is taken up with they might just go literally from one sport to the next with almost no break in between. If you're talking about the athlete that could be football, basketball, go into baseball or track or something like that. And I mean, you're just rolling through the fall from the fall to the spring, and there's not much time. Then on top of that, maybe they even go to a trainer that's working with them. That athlete doesn't have much time, and the cuffs or the bands have a tremendous advantage to still get some high quality training in a very short amount of time. And then on the other side of that, that athlete's going to need to recover. And we've heard a little bit about that tonight. What I've personally done with that is putting on the upper body and the lower body cuffs, and you can spend 5 minutes with them pumped up pretty tight. It's near maximal, and and you can literally just lay on the ground. It can be very, very passive. You can also be a little active with it. So in other words, you might just do some easy body weight exercises, body weight squats or things like that. Even some abs, could be a push up and you may just do just a few reps. You could also jump on a bike and ride a bike with them. So that's a huge benefit to the B3 bands that I've used is you can do anything with it, and there's no restriction as far as your movement and mobility. Um, but you can so like I said, you can even lay there for 5 minutes, give it a break, take a few minutes break, and repeat that cycle like 3 times. And you're looking at about 15 to 20 minutes of time, and that has proven to be a very, very beneficial method for recovery. Uh, I can't spit all the science like Chris can with that. He may be able to dive into that a little further if somebody was interested and get into some of those metabolic processes like biochemistry and such. But anyway, I can honestly say I know it works.
Awesome. Appreciate that, Chad.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate you sharing your experience with it. Thanks for joining us tonight. Okay, we got another chiropractor that's going to jump on here with us. And Dr. Clint, I've gotten to know Dr. Clint. First of all, he's a former rugby guy, former football guard, big dude, had a lot of wear and tear on his body. So he first experienced it himself. Similar story, loved the bands, feel younger, game changer. And then he implemented it with a lot of his patients. He's got a ton of his patients on it, but also had a great experience with soccer. Now, I've been in Dr. Clint's clinic. He's got all the gadgets, man. He's experienced for 20 years in practice. He's experienced and expertise in 20 different techniques. So he likes tools that work, and he's implemented BFR. So Dr. Clint, welcome. First, tell us about your experience, and then, what you saw with the soccer team that you implemented.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Mike. Personal experience was, they're great for own personal rehab because, played 4 years college football, 2 years college wrestling, 3 years of rugby, which was 6 seasons. So yeah, lots of wear and tear, lots of injuries. And it's pretty cool because you don't have to feel those if you stay on the bands. So in the soccer, my son was playing soccer and just came up with the idea of, it's mid-season or during the season, let's see if we can put these kids on the bands and see some changes. So we started implementing the bands after their practice, 2 to 3 times a week, depending on what happened with schedule, weather, stuff like that. Because we're in Colorado, so this is in the spring, and springtime in the Rockies, it gets pretty interesting. You can get snow that'll cancel a soccer practice. So over the course of about 8 weeks, we did these. We only did legs, like I said, 2 to 3 times a week, and the whole goal was get the kids into the burn and help them to learn how to push the burn to a deep level, deep fatigue. Very simple exercises, lots of split lunges, lots of calf raises, lots of body weight squats. Very simple stuff, light jogging across the soccer field, a little bit of ball handling, but not a lot. And we saw over the course of this little training program during the middle of the season that the majority of the BFR kids, because we did have an interesting study with this, because some kids did BFR, some kids did not, but everyone did the workouts. So the ones that did BFR, on average, knocked over a second off of their 40-yard dash time. Some were as high as a second and a half. The worst improvement that any kid had on BFR was 9/10 of a second off of his 40-yard dash time, which is pretty cool. It was a similar case with Dr. Otto's case of the basketball. We had some of the kids that were the slowest ended up being some of the faster kids. And then with the non-BFR kids, they did get better, but best improvement was about a second. So the worst improvement was about their best improvement. And with the soccer kids, it's pretty cool because we were able to teach them that deeper level of fatigue and that level of pain that you can experience without doing any damage, because we're all body weight exercises and all very light resistance, which was great.
Yeah, Dr. Clint, what if you could go back and
Oh man,
deload, right? And you heard an NFL and now a military strength guy he would do one heavy day and then two light BFR days. Imagine if you could go back, Doc, and reduce, 66% of the loading. What would that mean to you? And what could that do for these young athletes, right, as they go through their career?
Well, I think number one, it could help, like Dr. Otto, that low hanging fruit, leaving potential on the table, I think is huge because you can teach these kids, that they can get into a deeper level of fatigue and they can access potential that it's hard to access if you don't have a tool or a hack that is like BFR, right? And then these kids, they're training, everyone's talked about this, you're training at such a lighter load that the risk of injury really goes out the window. The research shows that. I mean, you don't need us to tell you that. Just type it into PubMed and you'll see risk of injury goes out the door when you're doing BFR. For kids, for high school athletes, that's huge. If you can make it your entire high school career without an injury and you're getting to the, say, top 5-10% of your human potential, you've got the world by the tail, man. You could do whatever. If you want to go play college sports in your sport, you very well could. Or you start to learn what your human potential really is, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you sharing that. I know, Doc, you're seeing it in all your patients. I mean, we had time, he could tell you some blood sugar stories about insulin resistance that he's fixing on people in very short time with BFR. And as you listen to Chris Duffin, and this guy's the mad scientist, what he shared with us, and, that went over my head. I'm sure it went over. I mean, this guy's a genius. What you can do at the cellular level, right, with health and creating fatigue is just absolutely fascinating. And I know, Doc, you're sharing it. Tell everybody real quick, because I can't leave it there. They got to hear, okay, what's this blood sugar thing? So tell them real quick about the blood sugar things you're seeing.
So I don't know how I got known as the blood sugar guy, but I can tell you this also, which is super cool, is we're working on becoming the cancer clinic because I've now got two guys that have pre and post blood work with BFR in the middle showing cancer is reversed. But so the blood sugar is super cool because I've got everyone's wearing CGMs now and being pre-diabetic, and people are being more aware of it because let's face it, that's a great way to ruin your health, is just let that metabolic disease set in. But I mean, I've had numerous times, this is super easy. They'll have the CGM on and blood sugar will be, 160, 170, whatever. And, the person will always have a defense for why it's that high. Oh, I just ate and, that's kind of where it is normal. They're justifying it and they say, that's fine. And everyone always tells me when they exercise, it's going to go up. And I've not had a single one to where it doesn't drop dramatically. The one dropped off the bottom of his CGM. It wouldn't even register. It dropped over 70 points in less than 10 minutes. It was just crazy to watch. And it's interesting is the guy got the CGM because his dad's having open heart surgery because he's got a lot of cardiovascular disease. So he's wanting to be proactive about his health. And the metabolic disease really caught him off guard because he didn't think his blood sugar was an issue. So I said to him immediately, so, well, what happens if you did that to your blood sugar every single day of the week? Because it was less than 10 minutes. You could do that every day. It wasn't like we put him through a rigorous workout. It was pretty simple stuff. And immediately the light bulb goes on. People are like, holy cow, this is the ticket.
Yeah, and I think, Dr. Clint, what we've seen, you, me, Dr. Clint, Dr. Carl, Dr. Greg, Dr. Ken, is this getting this fatigue, this shouldn't be optional. This has got to be an essential part of your life, like sleep and diet, because it's just fascinating, all these health problems that start to go away, and it's not a cure, but this is how we were designed, right? We're designed.
Yes.
But we overdo it. We just overload the body, and all we do is overstress it. Knowing what you know now, where do you think we're going to be in 10 years with health and fitness?
Well, it's crazy because I had a degree. I have an exercise science degree. I was a certified strength conditioning specialist from the NSCA. You had all the credentials, and this made me go, wait a second, you got to go back to school and relearn things. And I think if we get more people like more people like Chris Duffin. You got more guys doing this that are doing it from a legit research scientific standpoint. People are waking up and going, this is what I should be doing. I think
Mhm.
BFR will be mainstream. I think if you're not doing BFR, you're going to be behind the ball. You're talking youth sports is going to be using BFR, which is mind blowing. It's not even going to be high school. It's going to be, you know, freaking Pee
Mhm.
Wee football. They're using BFR because
Yeah.
it's just such a no brainer.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that, Dr. Clint. Okay, we got one more guest, and we haven't yet talked about bodybuilding, right? You get all these kids, right? They're in the gym, they're slamming the weights, they all want to be bodybuilders. This is Greg Whitehead. In 1990, Greg was Mr. South Bend, Indiana. He was Mr. Indianapolis, and he was Mr. Indiana. And when I met Greg, right, of course, he's skeptical, but he heard it from somebody that he trusted, and then he tried it. And I'll let you share, let Greg share the rest of the story with you. And then he implemented it in his son, different than Greg did it. Greg did it with the heavyweight. He showed his son how to do it with the lightweight. So, Greg, first of all, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Share with us kind of your story of,
Sure.
you got this pro bodybuilding background, and then all of a sudden somebody says, hey, Greg, grab some 5 and 10 pound dumbbells. And it just doesn't make sense, does it?
No, it doesn't. And I'm honored to be on this call with all these doctors and Chris and everyone. So thank you for having me on. Yeah, a couple things. One, I'll be 60 in June, and before the call, I alerted Dr. Mike, considering where he lives. We had 12 inches of snow. I blew and shoveled 8 driveways today, and I'm almost 60, and it didn't affect me whatsoever. One other thing, too, is I just had a heart scan done for $49 at our local hospital, and my plaque is 0. So I attribute the BFR bands wholeheartedly in the health and fitness that I've got. So 8 years ago, I was introduced to Dr. Mike, and I had quit working out for 10 years. I just didn't want to push heavy weight anymore. I had aspirations of being in good shape, but, my body had taken so much abuse back in college and after college. And when I was introduced to BFR and B3 bands, it was a game changer and a life changer for me. And I got back in really good shape. And my son at the time was 15 years old. And he said, Dad, I'd really like to start working out with you. And one of the things that I haven't heard yet on the call is I made it mandatory that my son only use BFR to get started. And the reason for that was because I wanted to teach him proper form and technique. And I did a lot of work with the Human Performance Laboratory at Ball State. I had a mentor, just watching people do certain things. And had I had the technology back then when I was younger, would have been a game changer. So it was basically a demand that I said, look, Ben, you can work out with me, but you have to only use BFR because you're going to learn proper form and technique. And we started off using the bands and doing a lot of compound movements. And then we got into a little more tricky things like power cleans and different types of exercises. After he was working out with bands for about months, we were able to graduate him into starters and finishers. So I wanted to teach him how to use heavier weight and to learn what it felt like. So we would actually let him work out with heavier weights. And at the end of the workout, we'd put the bands on, and then we'd alternate. We'd put the bands on so that he couldn't go as heavy. And if anybody wants to see before and after pictures of my son, it is truly remarkable the amount of mass that he built during that short amount of time. As a matter of fact, he got stung by a bee. We had to take him to the doctor, and they looked at me funny, and I was like, "What's the matter?" And they said, "Well, Ben's 30 pounds heavier than his last visit." And granted, he's 15, 16, 17 years old, so his testosterone level's super high, but the way that we worked out and used the bands enabled him to gain naturally 30 pounds of solid muscle just by using BFR and other forms and techniques that we used.
Yeah, and the great thing, Greg, he's going to be able to keep doing it, right? Because now he doesn't load. So Greg, you got all these coaches and parents, right? Being able to go back, right? What would you recommend to the coaches, the parents about the heavy weight? I love what you just shared. You can start them on BFR and get them doing the right technique, right? And
Correct.
then, right, and avoid all this trauma and injury. Now, how old is your son now?
He'll be 23 tomorrow.
Right. He's probably not walking around with
tomorrow.
Yeah. He's probably not walking around with every joint in his body hurting, is he?
No. Well, I do want to share this real quick. My son, a year ago, last December, was involved in a serious accident. He and his buddy were blowing leaves during work for their job, and my son and his best friend got run over by an impaired driver, and it broke my son's lower leg and it kind of messed up his carotid artery. He had his backpack blower on, and the guy was going 40 miles an hour. Had my son not had the muscle density that he had, it could have been much worse. The guy hit Ben, drug him 60 feet, and all he had was a broken leg, and his carotid artery got messed up a little bit. But if you saw him today, he would be fine. So there's stories of people that are fit athletes that have been in accidents, and had it not been for his muscle density and BFR and the proper weight training, who knows what could have happened. So we're blessed.
Yeah. And finally, Greg, from a building muscle standpoint, what can this do for everybody on the call that has kids, grandkids, neighbors, coaches that train these athletes? What would you recommend, they do with BFR?
Yeah, well, I had a personal training company for 8 years, and that was 20 some years ago. Had I had this technology back then, and even when I was in my bodybuilding rise, it was a game changer. Like I said, it's a stern word, but I would demand that anybody that I know that I would be training utilize BFR. I think in 5 to 10 years, that's all you're going to see is BFR training. The days of lifting heavy are going to be far and few between. You're still going to have the power lifters like Chris and some of these bodybuilder guys, but I mean, take a look at some of these Olympians. They can't even walk anymore because they lifted so heavy. Had they utilized this technology, they'd be in good shape.
Yeah. And I know I just saw a stat on how many bodybuilders we lost in 2025, right? 35-year-old bodybuilders.
Oh yeah.
Gone. Yeah. Gone. Not hurting, dead, gone. Right.
Yes.
And you hear from Chris, right? Instead of bodybuilding, destroying your heart and all that, right? BFR actually regenerates. He uses it in recovery. And if everybody listened real closely to Chris, anti-aging, Chris will tell you most guys his age that did what he did, they're limping around like Ronnie Coleman and can't even walk. And if you go follow Chris, I mean, this guy is just in incredible shape. So he was able to do this superhuman things, right? But still have his vitality. And now you listen to a guy like Greg, right? And is 60 years old, out shoveling 8 driveways. Now most guys 60, right, are going to wake up tomorrow and it's going to be rough. And Greg told you, man, it's like he doesn't even feel it. How's that possible? He's got the health and fitness of a 25-year-old because he's able to create the fatigue required to maintain that level. And Greg, just real quick, last topic I'll ask you, growth hormone, right?
Yep.
We're in our 60s, our growth hormones, is non-existent. What happens when we do BFR to our growth hormone levels?
We get a 25 times higher spike in HGH than without using the bands. And, people are sticking for it. They've got creams and all kinds of stuff. Why would you want to do that when you can actually throw on B3 bands and get that 25 times higher spike in HGH? I mean, again, I've people have said, you don't look like you're almost 60. And I attribute that to 8 years of BFR. It's helping my skin, my joints, everything in my life. My weight is good. And if it wasn't for B3, I think I'd be a total and complete disaster.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that with us today,
Well,
Greg. Okay, everyone, I want to show you one slide, then we'll wrap it up. I just want to make sure you're going to have access to get a hold of us so you can take this to the next level, because you're going to have a lot of questions, especially if you're new. You're probably already thinking of people that want to share with you. We're going to continue these calls. Now, one of the things that I want to make myself available for is you to invite a guest. So on February 8th at the same time, here's an opportunity for all of you to invite a guest to learn about BFR. We'll spend 30 minutes about what BFR is, and then we will answer their questions as it applies to their life. And then approximately 1 month from now, we're going to dive into weight loss. And if you are listening tonight, this is not a temporary fix for weight loss. This is a permanent solution. We're going to get into that on February 22nd. Now, take a picture, take a snapshot for everybody on the call. Couple things for everybody on the call, right? You know that we have an affiliate program. So everybody on the call, there is no cost for you to be an affiliate, whether you're new or you've been using the bands. We have an affiliate program so that you can have your own personal website and share. If you're on the call and you want to do some research, go out to b3sciences.com. Now, where do you get information? Where do you get your questions? Hey, where do I see Gaylord's golf program? Where can I see a bodybuilding workout? Where can I read some of this science, Dr. Mike? All your questions, all your support, simply email us at b3sciences.com. Hey, if you've been an affiliate and you don't know your website, you want to share, support at b3sciences.com. We're going to have this recording available for everyone for you to share. This will be made available on Tuesday so that you can share it with everybody, and we'll make that recording available. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. What I love about tonight's call is you got to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. These are elite athletes. These are coaches. These are doctors sharing with you. And I can tell you one thing for sure. Everybody on this call, from Greg to Dr. Ken to Chris to Vince, right? These people do this for a living. I can assure you they did their homework and they've read the science on BFR, and you got to hear straight from them how powerful it's been. So I'm going to now thank everybody for tuning in. If you want to stick around and ask questions, I'll stick around, and we'll hit the unmute button here. So if you'd like to ask a question, simply hit the unmute button. It's popping up in front of you. If you do have a question, I'll go to Larry Indiviglia. Larry's a lifelong fitness pro. Larry, anything you want to add or anything you want to ask tonight?
I have a question, Dr. Mike, and either for Dr. Dickason or Greg. Form and function with BFR with lighter weights. we can accentuate the concentric action a little bit more, supposedly in the BFR and the science behind it. You recruit more muscle fibers rather than in traditional lifting, maybe, you might emphasize the eccentric part of the load or part of the movement. Could you guys comment on any of that in what you've been doing with athletes? Do you spend more time on the concentric side of the particular movement rather than doing a traditional slower, eccentric down up? Just was curious about that as far as execution.
Let's go to Greg Whitehead. This is his, area of expertise. Greg, what would you say about that?
Yeah, I have found that when using BFR, when you're doing a slower movement, Larry, you're going to get that burn a little bit quicker.
Yep.
So typically that 20 to 25 rep range
Yep.
is good. But if you're going slower, you're going to find that muscle is going to fatigue a lot faster around the 12 to 15 rep range.
Interesting.
And because you're using lighter weight, you're not affecting the soft tissue. So that's a great question that you had. So you can actually throw either one. You can do a faster movement, or you can do a slower movement.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
but
Greg.
that's a great point for everybody on the call. When you go slower, right, it's less stress. One of the things we teach everybody on the call is when you're young, it's different. For us on the call, when you're exercising and you're not in the burn, that's called stress time. There's no other way to get around it. If you're working out for an hour and you're in a traditional workout and you're feeling the burn for 5 minutes, that's 55 minutes of stress time on your body. So what Greg is sharing with you is if we slow that down, not only do we reduce stress, but we get into the burn faster. BFR is all about getting in the burn and creating a high percentage of time in the burn. I teach a 50% rule. It's one of my rules if I'm going to coach you or help you. If you're in the bands for 10 minutes, we're going to go for 5 minutes of burn. If you're in the bands for 5 minutes, we're going to go for 2.5 minutes of burn. What that does is that flips the scale on the stress anabolic signal. We want all fatigue and low stress. Look at this teeter-totter. Here's me at 52 years old working out for an hour, and I'm getting 5 to 8 minutes of burn. And that's way too much stress. So here I am, 52. I'm doing the workouts I've always done, and I'm barely hanging on, and I'm always sore, right? So I switch over to 10-minute workouts. And what happens? It's all fatigue, and my stress score goes down. Here's another way, everyone, to look at this equation that I like to teach. And here's the equation, right? Fatigue is a positive score, okay? I can go in the gym, can't do it anymore, but when I used to, in my 40s and 50s, I can go lift the heavy weights, and I can get probably a +8 signal of fatigue. Now, Chris Duffin and the elite guys, they're getting 10 fatigue. I can get a 7 or 8. But what if the stress on my joints and the load is also a 7? What's 7 minus 7? It's a big goose egg.
Yeah.
This is what most people are doing in their middle part of their life. They're just hanging on, and they're actually going backwards, and they're always sore. Now, introduce BFR. You can get the same fatigue signal. Let's call it a 7, and you can do it in a fraction of the time. But the stress signal's a 2. So at 52 years old, I go from a 7 anabolic signal and a 7 stress. That's a goose egg. I'm going nowhere. And I'm lost my 6-pack, can't keep my muscle. And I switch to BFR in 10 minutes. I get the same 7, but the stress signal's a 2. What's 7 minus 2, everyone? That's called a +5.
Yep.
That means I'm in a positive anabolic state. My 6-pack comes back. My pain goes away. Why does everybody say, I'm no longer sore? I'm not in pain, because you reduced the stress signal dramatically that you get as you age, but yet you get the same fatigue you got when you're younger. And all of a sudden, You flip the body out of cortisol and you flip it into growth hormone, IGF-1, testosterone, vascular endothelial growth factor, healthier mitochondria, better blood sugar metabolism, healthier heart, better brain, and all of a sudden you feel 20 years younger. That's called BFR. And that's what's so fascinating about it. And one of the things I always say, and we've got to teach the younger generation now, remember this saying: if you can't do it at 50, your high school athlete shouldn't be doing it at 15. If the human body can't do it at 50, you shouldn't be doing it at 15 unless it is absolutely necessary. And you heard Chad Dennis say, look, I'm loading guys once and then I'm doing BFR twice. Because if you're doing it when you're 15 and 18, and you look at my son, he's now 27 years old, and he'll tell you everything's starting to break down, right? Because he was doing moves when he was younger that he could have avoided with BFR. Brian, I see you've unmuted yourself there. Brian, do you have a question? Okay, we'll come back to Brian if he's got. Go ahead, Brian. Do you have a question?
Mike.
Okay. Dr. Peter
Mike.
Fisher. Doc is got an awesome story. He's not only a physician, but he's in incredible shape for, a guy his age. And I had the chance to meet 67. And, he's got his shirt on, but you ought to see how this guy's built at 67. But Doc, tell us, real quick.
I have just a question to probably Greg or Chris. Does the level of the burning, the level of pain, plays any role? If you go to the end of the 20 or 25 reps, it burns even more and more. Sometimes you just, does the level of burn just plays a role in a lactate output?
Well, that's a great question. Then we might bring him in. So a lot of people have noticed light burn, medium burn, hard burn. Why is the burn different? You have slow and fast twitch muscles. Slow twitch, you use oxygen. That's your cardio, but you don't build big muscles on your slow twitch. That's the fast twitch. So you start out, you're doing a light exercise and you're using the slow twitch muscles. The oxygen starts to run out in the slow twitch and they fatigue and you start to feel the burn. What's happening? You're engaging the fast twitch and starting to now metabolize glycogen and produce lactic acid, but it's a light burn. Now, as you keep going, what happens is the slow twitch start to fall off and you get into a higher percentage of the fast twitch. You're producing more lactic acid. What you want to do is you want to go from that light burn into that medium burn and then eventually get to that hard burn. What does that mean? That means you are predominantly in the fast twitch muscles. You're still doing a light movement, but it feels like you're max lifting. The hard burn is not micro tearing. It's not damage. It is just a higher percentage of fast twitch muscles that are being recruited. And that is where you get the growth hormone, everyone. So what's happening, Dr. Fisher, is the slow twitcher falling off and you're getting into what's called the glycolic pathway, the type 2X fibers, like your max lifting. And that is where you get this high concentration of lactate, and then you get the growth hormone. Great question, Doc. Anybody else with a question? Before we go ahead.
Dr. Mike, I work with high school athletes and I do sports performance training.
Yes,
I'm
Christian.
wondering what the ideal, how many sessions in a week and how long my athletes should be using BFR in those sessions. And is it a progression of start with 1, move to 2? Like, I'm just trying to figure out the logistics of it.
Okay, so number one, what we know is we need to get a minimum of 3 minutes of burn time. How do I know this? Because I measure blood lactate. Okay. So for the average person on the call, we want to shoot for about 3 minutes of burn time in a workout. So if we're using the 50% rule, that's about a 6 or 7 minute workout. Now, when we start getting into athletes and want to push human potential, we want to get up to 5 to 6 minutes of burn time. Okay. That's where we're going to push human potential. Okay. So if we apply the 50% rule, that would be a 10 to 12 minute workout. And you heard a lot of these docs on here saying, right, that they do these 10 to 12 minute workouts, but they are very fast, right? And they're always in the burn. So, Kristen, if we're doing endurance athletes, it'd be a lot of endurance type moves, shuttle runs up and down the steps, repeating that pattern, going for 5 to 6 minutes of burn. If it's a strength athlete, right, we're doing more of strength moves, but we're still using light weights. Okay. So what I would suggest is when you implement BFR, you shoot for 2 to 3 minutes of burn time and then start stacking that and shoot for a max of about 6 minutes of burn. Now apply same training principles, right? If we want strength, we're going to do buys, tries, back, shoulders, and chest, right? If we want to do compound movements, same thing. If we're doing endurance, right, we'll do endurance stuff like basketball moves or stairs or running hills. So the training exercises that we do stay the same. We're just now compressing time and going for 50% of the time in the bands, we're getting the burn, right? And then we're going to build up to that max of like 5 to 6 minutes of burn time.
When you build up, what does that look like? I mean, how often would you say, okay, we're going to start with the 3 minutes and then we're going to do this for a week or two?
Week and then 3.5 minutes, week 4 minutes, week 4, keep every week go up by 30, go up by maybe a half minute.
Okay. Every week.
Yeah. Every week.
And then are you looking at 2 to 3 sessions a week?
Well, it depends, right, on what kind of athlete we've got, right, and what their schedule is, right? If we can get them into 3 to 4 sessions a week, that would be ideal, especially in the off season. If we're in season and they got other stuff going on, we're probably 1 to 2 sessions a week. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, if we can take these athletes, especially in the off season, and we can train them for 2 or 3 days with the trainer and then give them stuff to do at home for 2 or 3 days, even better. 5 to 6 days is even better, especially in the off season.
Hey, Dr. Mike.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Important piece that just came out of that we didn't really hit on: overtraining. Back in my day, you can't hit chest every day. You need that rest. So I think, they're with BFR, you can literally do it every day, but there's not an overtraining component to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things we see at the Olympic level that Dr. Jim tells me about is at the Olympic level, BFR is not moving their fatigue higher. These Olympic athletes already train a lot of times until they pass out. So what's the difference? With BFR, they're getting that level of fatigue with less load and less wear and tear. They recover faster. So what they see at the Olympic level now is they can train more often and be fresher. And that has incredible value. And that's why we saw Bodie and Lindsay and Michaela, right? Athletes use this. And then we saw Olympic athletes that were not medal type athletes that Jim trained, and he turned them into bronze, silver, and gold medaling athletes by simply implementing BFR. Again, I think the summary, everyone, as we wrap up the call is this: BFR has not changed what we do. We still train and we do cardio and we do lifting moves and we do power and explosion, all the type of training that we've learned along the way. BFR just makes it, number one, dramatically more efficient, which is a win every time. It allows young athletes like we're talking about, whether it's elementary, middle school, or high school, and it moves them to a different level of fatigue than they've ever experienced, which you would think that would mean more injury, more soreness, more potential chronic problems. Well, because we are reducing time, load, and volume, it's the exact opposite. These athletes are getting stronger, more powerful, and they're doing it with less injury, and they're becoming healthier. And that in itself tells you where BFR is at. And in closing, I'll share with you this. 10 years ago, this was a novelty. And I would talk to people like some of the people on this call, and BFR would just go right in one ear and out the other. Now we've got all this science, and we've got all this research, and we have all these testimonials from these high level and in many places world-class athletes. BFR is here to stay, and I'm super excited for you to not only implement it in your life, but for us to be able to be the company. And I can tell you, we are the only company out there that's implementing this in young athletes. We are by far the leader in implementing BFR with young athletes in performance. Thanks for being on the call, everyone. It's great to see many of the faces again and names. If you want to know more, you want to learn how you can be an affiliate, you want to get started with BFR, you want to get this recording, you want to be able to ask questions, simply reach out to support at b3sciences.com, and we'll be here to support you. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, tonight. And for those people out there in all those snow belts, stay safe with all that big snow you've got out there. Have a great week, everyone.